Hello, everyone. Please be seated if you're standing. Thank you very much. And I'd like to welcome you here for another Peaceful Solution Character Education Program training course. And we are in, as most of you know, we are in the intermediate character unit. And we've made it to page 40. And before we continue on page 40, what I'd like to do is look back. If you'll turn the page back over one time to page 38 and 39. So we're talking about the home and the things that take place in the home. And currently right now we're spending a little bit more time on some of the negative things that take place and the effect of these things. And we'll be moving on, and we'll get to the positive, next time around. But on page 38, just to go over a few highlights, when there are problems in the home. And if you look about halfway down, I'd like to draw your attention to this sentence. An adult's experiences, values, and character define what kind of parent he or she will be. What we need to keep in mind is that not only will it define what kind of parent they are, but it will also define what kind of parent their child will be. Because they're putting things into the child, even while the child is still in the womb. Physical abuse, well, let's look at the last section of that first paragraph. In these homes, parents are often negligent. In other words, they don't provide their children with sufficient food or clothing, nor do they give their children attention or love. Homes where these types of abuses and negligence occur are called dysfunctional homes. Now, I guess we should have gone back a little bit further there. Although most parents treat their children with love and respect and provide them with safety, food, and shelter, there are some parents, because of their upbringing and choices, who are verbally, emotionally, physically, and even sexually abusive to their children. Now, physical abuse results in internal or external bruises, fractures, brain damage, permanent injury or death, and many mental scars. Emotional and verbal abuse, if you'll continue looking at that page, even though physical pain is not inflicted, emotional and verbal abuse are just as damaging. Years ago, the National Committee for Prevention of Child Abuse made the public aware of this form of abuse by displaying posters that read, "Words hit as hard as a fist." I remember these posters. They really did bring it to people's attention. Whether it did much benefit or not, it did bring it to people's attention, but it wasn't really, there was no teaching that went with it as far as I know. Words such as "you're stupid," "you can't do anything right," "I wish you were never born," they cause rejection, fear, and resentment. And many of us, even sitting here tonight, have experienced these things. On page 39, if you look up at the top, it says, in a home where there is negligence, children are frequently left without food, attention, or love. And I know in my life, I saw people that were, they'd get out of school and they'd go home and there was no parent there. Even at a young age, they were left to their own devices to do whatever they wanted to do. And often there was not any food. These homes, if you look on down, these homes usually lack structure in that there is no set time for daily routines. Routines such as a study time, bath time, and bedtime are important in teaching character traits such as dependability and responsibility. And of course it shows a little chart right there. Let's go on over to page 40 and let's get started fresh here. Now, actually, we always want to look at the lesson plan and see where we're at. So I'm sorry if you'll turn to LP2D and look at number 4. And I believe the last teacher went over this. I'll just go over it briefly. Tell students that because family plays such a vital role in the development of character, some problems within the family are extremely harmful to children. And it says to ask students what problems they think can exist within a family that could hinder the development of a positive character. So you can be thinking about this, and it might be alcoholism, depression, mental problems, whatever. And then it says to have students turn to pages 38 through 41, which we're in that area right now, in the handbooks, and read the section entitled When There Are Problems at Home. And that's what we're currently doing. Then we'll move on and read and discuss the narratives about Ricky and Shantae's experiences found on page 43 and how these affected their character. And you'll have an opportunity to look at those a little bit. So let's go on back to page 40 now. So in abusive homes, the rights of children to live in safety and to develop a positive character are taken away. Now remember that developing. On page 169, you can always check your glossary and see if the words are in there, but on page 169, develop is to expand or enlarge, to aid in the growth of, strengthen, to improve the quality of, and refine. Now, so it's not just a word to be taken casually. It takes effort to do this. When someone grows up in a home where there is physical and sexual abuse, their self-concept and character development will be affected. Notice it says will be. There's just no way out of it. It's going to be affected in some manner. Self-concept is the way you see yourself. Now, we're going to talk about this in just a minute, but remember that self-concept is the way you see yourself. And you're going to hear about this self-concept in other handbooks of the Peaceful Solution too. It is very important to have a positive concept of who you are, because people with a negative self-concept tend to be sad, depressed, angry, and resentful. So we're seeing some character traits here, and also some descriptions of emotional things taking place with people, the depression and being sad, and then the angry and resentful. These emotions can lead to negative character traits such as being hateful, aggressive, and revengeful. So when you think about it, the being sad and depressed and even it mentions later on embarrassed and everything. These are primary things that occur, these primary feelings, and if we don't take control of it right then, they can go south. You can turn into a bad situation. So these negative character traits often result in violent behaviors also. There's a lot of violence in the world today, and I'm sure many of the people that are suffering this violence did not come from functional homes. They came from dysfunctional homes, and it was part of their life. Read the following true account of one young woman's struggle with sexual abuse and the negative effects it had on her character. In 1987, Cheryl Pearson served a prison sentence for arranging to have her father killed, after she learned that he was sexually abusing her younger sister. Now, Cheryl had also been sexually abused for several years, and Cheryl's mother knew of the abuse. However, she did nothing to intervene and protect her two daughters because she was afraid of losing her husband. And how many times have we heard about this in the news where another family member knew but wasn't saying anything about it out of fear? In this case, out of the fear of losing her husband, fear of getting beat themselves or abused themselves in some manner. Especially a child. If a child is aware of these things going on with another child, there's a lot of fear and just not knowing what to do. We're talking about, in a lot of these cases, like this one, a parent doing these things. Now, there's hope for even the parents that have done these things. The Peaceful Solution actually gives hope to not only those that are victims, but those that are the perpetrators also in these things. Now, many that are in prison right now that have either done these things or been victims of these abuses, I know in dealing with the prisons, I've talked to many people, and there's always something in their childhood, there's always something that they go back to on how they were treated, on how they grew up. You know, there's always something there. And I've heard a lot of stories. I've heard stories from people in prison. I've heard it from teachers in schools. All of us have. In the Peaceful Solution, many times that when we went to the schools, we heard about certain situations out in the audience, and we're asked to please be careful what we say. I'm going to share something with you tonight. I really want you to think about this, because these horrible things, I mean, they can occur in a small town too. It doesn't have to be a big city. I know a teacher, and the teacher told me of a few cases of, and this was a 4th grade teacher, and told me of a few cases of things that took place. Now, some of you might have heard these before, but one of the abuse cases, and this teacher had to deal with the situation. Other children made fun of this child in the class, but this child would make animal sounds. He didn't talk much, but when he was angry, he would bark. When things were going a little better for him, he would chirp like a bird. And that's really the way he communicated his emotions. Now you might wonder why. Well, it was because the boy was abused as a child. Him and his siblings were chained up in the house pretty much every waking moment that they had. They were chained up. They were fed like a dog. And this is how they learned, or this particular child learned to cope with these things. And he was in a public school. Another one, the boy had a bodysuit on that he came to school in, covered most of his face and his body. And the boy was, the babysitter doused the 2 children with gasoline and lit them on fire. And so this particular boy got burnt more because he was trying to put the fire out on his brother. He was trying to save his brother, and he got burnt up more. Another case, and this is not a large town, and this is a period, this is one classroom for a period of 20 years or so. I wonder what all the other teachers in the school dealt with also. I wonder what all the other teachers in the other several schools that were in this small city, I wonder what they dealt with that was similar. There were children in elementary school that their mom opened the door one day, and they were all standing with her at the door, and somebody shot her in the face with a shotgun and killed her right in front of the children. Now, I want you to think. Go back for a moment and think about that self-concept and the way you see yourself in that first paragraph. And think about it. Put yourself in their shoes for a minute. Use some empathy, and think if you were one of these children that I just mentioned to you. And think what a thing to overcome that would be. These children blamed themselves for the things that were taking place. There were some children in the classroom that it was pretty obvious. One of the boy in the classroom was not being fed properly and wasn't taking care of himself hygienically. And so when asked what was going on, he started crying. And he said him and his sister, well, their mom had been taken to jail, and I don't know where they were at, but him and his sister were hiding in the closet every night hiding from the drug people. He still came to school. So these are not, when we're dealing with this is not a light subject at all. And I know many that are here sitting in this classroom tonight can associate with some of these things. And the great news is we're learning the peaceful solution so that we can teach the world and never have these things take place again. That's the great thing. Well, it's clear to see that abuse has a negative effect on character. This person in the case study there, Cheryl, became revengeful and arranged for her father to be killed. Wow, what a thing to arrange for your father to be killed. You know, many people grew up without a father, whether from divorce or death or something of this nature, and I bet they would do anything to have their father with them. So it had to be something so severe. You know, it really had an effect on her to be able to do something like this. And most people who are abused don't go to this kind of extreme. You know, the development of their character is affected, though, when these things take place. And in this case, it developed into a very negative character. You know, it works both ways. The development of character, it can be negative or positive. So in addition to anger, violence, and retaliation, abuse also causes feelings of loneliness, isolation, and embarrassment. And this embarrassment, you know, that's one of those primary emotions that'll start kicking in the anger and everything else. But because of this, children often keep their abuse a secret. They're afraid that if they tell, they would be blamed. And again, I know of people that their personal stories that they've told, they indeed were blamed. You know, a young woman blamed that she enticed her dad, you know. And it was a similar situation where the mom, you know, was scared of losing the husband and their life falling apart. So, you know, it takes place over and over again. If you look at the statistics, it's there. But if you're in a situation where you're being abused, then it is the adult who should be ashamed and embarrassed, not you. So be courageous and speak up. I mean, keep in mind that it's not your fault. It's the role of the adult to keep you safe and to guide and prepare you. A child should have a safe place to go, whether it be school, whether it be home. They should have a safe place to go. And it's our job to guide and prepare them for adulthood by teaching them right from wrong. The right way from the wrong way. And it's also the role of the adults in your lives to love you, support you, and encourage you. No adult, not even a member of your family, not even a member of your family has the right to mistreat you or abuse you in any way. And remember, that includes physical, mental, and verbal abuse. It's all covered. There's not one thing here that's being singled out tonight. Now, there's a difference between abuse and disciplines, and I've seen this too. Some teens have tried to charge their parents with abuse for insisting chores and homework be done. Imagine that. Being grounded for breaking household rules is a form of discipline. It's not abuse. I've seen child protective services come to, you know, caring, loving families that did provide a safe home for their children. I've seen them come and put the strong arm of these services on that family and really look at every move they make and check their background and everything because of a frivolous accusation over something like this, over a teenager getting mad because they had to clean up the garage or mow the lawn or, you know, whatever the case may be, turn down the music. these things occur too. So, there's nothing here that's imaginary. This is all real. And this is part of a dysfunctional family. Now, if we'll turn over to look over to page 41, here are some other problems that affect the home and the development of a positive character. Remember, development. You got to put some effort into it. Alcoholism, domestic violence, substance abuse, divorce. And I know there's people sitting right here that have experienced these things, and you might have experienced all of them. Divorce is rampant. Alcoholism and substance abuse is to be dependent upon alcohol or drugs. These substances are highly addictive. Now, an addiction, and this is a pretty great definition of this, an addiction is the overwhelming desire. It's the overwhelming desire to do something. In this case, it's the overwhelming desire to abuse alcohol or take drugs, such as marijuana, cocaine, heroin, etc. The danger of being addicted is that it clouds one's ability to think clearly and rationally. Yeah, it actually, it says it in the next sentence, a person who is addicted will put the need for more drugs or alcohol above everything else in their life. And this doesn't just occur to the guy you see on the street out there with a cardboard box, staying at a deserted grocery store or something like that. It's not just that type of person. These are people that some of them function in society by some miracle. They function in society, even though they put this drugs and alcohol above everything else in their life. They want it so bad that they'll do anything to get it, the overwhelming desire. So if they've got to go work a little bit and get it, they can function and go work for a while. If they got to rob a place to get it, they go rob a place. So they actually set a goal on how they're going to achieve this overwhelming desire. Excuse me. So the presence of alcoholism and substance abuse within a family often leads to neglect and child abuse in all its various forms, as well as domestic violence. If you check it out, there's many stories, and again, I know people. I've heard all the stories. It's just unbelievable. But toddlers running around in a household where people are sitting around smoking marijuana and doing doing really heavy drugs, cocaine and so forth, sitting around blowing the smoke in the toddler's face, wondering if the child will get high. These are the kinds of things that take place. Remember, if you right back up there in that second paragraph, it says, the danger in being addicted is that it clouds one's ability to think clearly and rationally. A person who's addicted will put that need for more drugs and alcohol above everything, even above their children. Domestic violence is the use of physical force to injure or abuse another within a family. In these homes, there's so much fear and violence, it's very difficult to grow and develop in a positive way. In addition to these factors, there's also divorce to consider and its effects on the family. Children who watch their parents go through divorce or death in the family, something like that, suffer tremendous feelings of guilt, frustration. They frequently blame themselves for their parents' decisions in the case of divorce and feel powerless to change their parents' choices. I'd like to go back for a moment to page 35. So turn to page 35. And this is a reminder from everything you just heard. I want you to keep this part in mind. Halfway down the first paragraph, or towards the end, it says, it has been stated that all forms of parental interaction, whether verbal, physical, or otherwise, assist in reinforcing children's values and behavior. Again, remember, towards positive or towards negative. It can go either way. Now, the role of parents in the family in shaping a positive or negative character cannot be overstated. So, once again, hearing that, that it cannot be overstated. Negative or positive character has the ability to destroy a family or strengthen and build that family unit. Then what I'd like to do, if you would, is go all the way towards the front to page XV. I guess that would be 15, page XV, Influence from the Teacher, the preface. And this is from the author of The Peaceful Solution. He says, thinking back on my early school years, I remember many of the things taught by my teachers that were not part of the regular curriculum. In those teachings, it was those teachings that influenced my thinking, and many of them still guide my actions today. This was positive reinforcement from teachers, from family members. If you look in the second paragraph, he says, I remember early in his childhood, his dad saying, son, 2 wrongs don't make a right. So, just to let you know that we are going through both positive and negative. We're going through a functional family and a dysfunctional family in this book, and you'll be able to see both areas, both sides of this, of how a family should be conducting themselves. One thing I wanted to point out, that divorce is just unbelievable. You know, the Canterbury Law Group says there's 2,400 divorces a day in the United States. That's 875,000 per year divorces in the United States. Now, take, 2 or 3 children with each one of those families, and then now how many do you have? And we've already learned that divorce and other things that occur within a family, making it dysfunctional, children that watch their parents go through these things, they suffer, and then it shows in their conduct, in their behavior. And 63% of children from divorced homes suffer from anxiety, sadness, moodiness, phobias, and depression. 56% of the children's grades dropped in school or have grades below their ability. 43% display aggression towards parents. And I might add, towards teachers too. There's a lot of violence in the schools today and in the homes. I think what I'd like to do at this time, for this last paragraph, I'd like to go ahead, if you'll all welcome the next teacher, Chris Heiler. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, everyone. Once again, thank you for coming, and for all of those that are joining in across the globe, we welcome all of you here. And of course, continuing on with what David was bringing about, the adversities that we face in a family and the challenges that arise, especially as we're on the topic here of divorce and these things that are set in through the separation of a mother and a father. And I want to go back up and read this one part to get into the minds of what decisions that are made by adults. We look at our children and we think, well, children should be able to make sound decisions. They should be able to handle things. But you have to remember, in a divorce, you have 2 grown adults that are acknowledging they're going back on their word. They're acknowledging they're quitting something they said they would never quit. A commitment that they promised to each other, and they're stopping. But yet they'll look at their children and say, never give up. Hold fast to that. Don't ever be a quitter. And divorce, when a child has to go through it, the child has no knowledge of all the details that go into that. And when you look back up here at the statistics where it says 63% of children from divorced homes suffer anxiety, sadness, moodiness, phobias, and depression. When you look at the word anxiety, because anxiety is a word that you're going to hear a lot in the next 2 pages, the definition for that from the Merriam-Webster's dictionary is a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease about an event or something with an uncertain outcome. And when you have parents, you have a child that's growing up with 2 parents, and they see them, and then the uncertainty of not just having mom and dad there, well, now we got to move. We can't afford to live here. Well, then now mom or dad doesn't have the income they once had. Now how are we going to eat? How's things going to be? Life changes drastically for a child who is looking for certainty. And that's what children, if you remember, we started out by saying parents are the first teachers that a child will ever have. And when a child is put through such adversity by its two teachers who are now going their separate ways, it really puts a challenge in the mind of a child on how to be successful in life. And could you imagine if you have two parents that, let's say they hide the problems from the children. The children never see the problems. So you can imagine when the parents get a divorce, a surprise that takes place. Thought everything was okay. Now, if they see mom and dad kind of yelling and screaming at each other all the time, not such a surprise, but it's still pretty traumatic. But let's say mom and dad will, for the child's sake, let's just hide these problems and we'll go about our way. And then the day you tell little Johnny or little Susie, we're going to get a divorce. Imagine the traumatic shock in a child's mind when they're thinking, I thought everything was okay. And then you told me if I keep the rules, everything works out to be okay. Well, why are we saying that? Because we need to reinforce in our minds. When we tell our children keeping the rules, or when we tell other students keeping the rules will make everything okay, we have to be examples of that ourselves. And before you quit anything, and this is to parents also, especially in CPS classes, before you quit something, try to fix it first. Anybody can quit. Anybody can walk away, but when you're dealing with children, you're not just dealing with your own emotions as an adult. You're dealing with a life or two lives or three lives, or there's no endless number to it, lives that are affected. And it's something that parents have to be mindful of, because remember what we said about abuse being. Abuse is also deceptive and not educating a child. Hiding things from a child, telling the child everything will be okay when everything's not okay, is very deceptive. And when they see things fall apart, it's very demoralizing for a child. You actually set in the child's mind. You can set goals, and somebody can take it all away from you. And think about that as we continue reading this last paragraph on this page, because it's a really hard thing to deal with when a child has to face this one part right here. If you had to deal with separation or divorce in your family, remember, it's your parents' decision. As a child, there's nothing you can do about it. You can watch that movie they put out about the Parent Trap, and you can try all these little games that they play, and they make it look like that all you have to do is this and that, and you can put everything back together. But emotional scars are usually pretty deep in a divorce. Notice it says, although it affects you and your siblings, there is very little you can do about it. So imagine a child, it's two teachers, it's the two people that it feels cares for it the most. They start looking, you care for us, but you don't care for each other. What do you think that puts in the mind of a child? When are you going to quit me? When are you going to not divorce me, but just quit caring? Being sad or angry is a normal emotion to feel at the same time. One thing about being sad, remember that is a secondary emotion, just like anger. Something has to take place before that emotion gets going. And we'll get into anger along with that. But there has to be an event. Do you ever just, I'm sad, and nothing occurs, you're just sad? No, something has to take place in your life, and it leads to sadness, and sadness can lead to anger. These things can fall through, but there's a process. And we're talking about children right now that when you have parents separate, they're trying to process the two teachers they had in their life who's now breaking agreements. Well, it says, being sad or angry is a normal emotion to feel at that time. So talk about the way you feel to a trusted adult or to a close friend. If there's guidance counselors in many places, always try to find someone from the outside source, because a trusted friend could be, well, I trust mom. I'll talk to mom about it. And this is sad, Sometimes parents love to tell the negative things about the other parent. Well, let me tell you why I'm leaving your dad. Or the dad, let me tell you why I'm leaving your mom. And they'll feed a lot of negative things in the mind of a child, things a child should never know. You know, as a mother and a father, a mom and a dad, their problems are their problems. It's not the child's problems. If the parents get themselves financially in a struggle, that's not the child's fault. If mom and dad have problems between themselves, that's not the child's fault. But sometimes these things tie in. So if you're a child, seek someone from outside of that relationship for guidance. Someone that can give you, when it says trusted, someone that's known amongst the community, or a guidance counselor at school, a counselor that you've been assigned to. Those are very well known these days. Counselors during times of COVID are in abundance. But turn to someone that's outside the situation for guidance. Even though that it is a time of emotional upheaval, continue to focus on building your positive character. You know, upheaval, it's a challenge. It's like you're trying to walk uphill with 10 pounds of stone on your back. And the harder you try, the heavier the weight gets on your back and the steeper the hill gets. And you feel that it's impossible as a child to get through this. Well, allowing yourself to become disrespectful, angry, or hostile, you know, you can also say rage there, because the word hostile is defined as an act of war. And of course, anger, when left uncontrolled and not managed, turns to rage. And remember, anger is a secondary emotion. Anger is generated from a primary emotion. And we'll get into those as we move forward. Now, allowing yourself to become disrespectful, once again, angry and hostile, will not bring your parents back together. You know, and not only will it not bring your parents back together, when you look at any situation that we deal with, getting mad about it won't fix it. It's like if you're driving your car and your car breaks down because you didn't maintain it. Getting out, stomping it, slamming the doors, yelling at it, throwing a wrench at it, does that ever fix it? No, it won't. And that's not a living thing. It has no emotion. Imagine what it does to a living thing like a child or a husband or a wife when aggression takes place. And let's not fool ourselves. We can all look and go, that's not my family. We started off by saying every family has a little bit of dysfunctionality. Anger is normal. Disagreements take place every day. It's how they're processed that determines whether it's positive or negative. And when problems are left to linger, as we've talked about before, they're shelved, and we'll get into that much more in another unit. When problems are shelved, it's like a ticking time bomb. They're going to explode. And in marriage, they end in divorce a lot of the times. Notice it says, be determined to avoid this trap yourself when you become an adult. Whenever a child is in a divorce, and I grew up with a young man that was my best friend in elementary school. And when his mom and dad got a divorce, I seen a massive change in him. He went from someone that was big into sports, we both were, to someone that by the time we were in middle school, it was drugs. That's where I seen drugs the first time, was a friend offered me drugs. And my mom and dad, I never seen drugs. And back in the 1980s, they had a Just Say No program. It didn't really cause people to say no, but between that and the fear of my parents literally letting them down and correcting me, I never touched a drug. But it was only from the impression that was put in my mind that I never did. But I had a friend who I grew up with from kindergarten all the way through. When we got to high school, we went our separate ways because by the time we were in high school, drugs were heavy for him and I had other priorities in mind. But I didn't see the change in him until his parents divorced. And then I seen the constant battle because I would go stay at his house sometimes. There was always a constant battle. Dad would do something to try to win him over. Mom would do something to try and win him over. Dad would say negative things about mom, and well, mom's got a new husband now. And there was always a lot of negativity. A lot of negativity. And of course, to him, he just wanted to get away from all of it. And drugs was his way of getting away from all of it. That was his escape. You know, and I don't know what became of him. Never talked to him again after high school. So I have no idea what became of him. But it definitely can separate even the best of friends when you try to ask them, why are you doing it? But even when I was a child, I would look at it and think, I don't know what to do. What would you do? All I knew was I didn't want to go over there anymore. I didn't want to be a part of that. And I was very sad he had to experience it. But as a child, when you're a young person, I had no clue how to help him, didn't know what to say. I was clueless. And you can imagine when young children, when they go to their friends, what would you do? Well, I know when I was that age, I didn't have a clue what to do. Couldn't tell you. I wasn't experiencing that in my life. I'd never seen it in my life. I didn't know what to do. It just looked very abnormal to me. It looked pretty much like war. Turning over to page 42, and we're going to get into some hard facts. And these hard facts, we know we're failing in society. Remember when we started off with the Peaceful Solution, we judged the success of the program by behavioral changes. So you can judge the failure of society by the lack of behavioral changes. And of course, when we talk about abuse and we get into this abuse, please remember, education is not part of what they consider abuse. When I say they, statistically. If your parents tell you lies to get you through your childhood, just to hide things from you, to get you to want to participate in certain things, and to get you to do certain things, and then when you grow up later to find out, Mom and Dad lied to me, well, how does it make you feel? Well, some people go, it didn't bother me. Some people, I'll never trust them again. I wouldn't want to take that risk of lying to my children just to try to win them over when they're young, just so when they get older, they're going to find out I was a liar. How do you feel when you find out someone lied to you, deceived you? Well, that's defined as abuse. And it's defined as abuse for a reason. Well, here were the first cold hard fact. It says long-term effects of child abuse include fear, anxiety, depression, anger, hostility, inappropriate sexual behavior, a poor concept of themselves, and difficulty forming relationships. Now, pretty much everyone can know what fear is. When you're a young child, most people, I would say, scared of the dark. That's pretty common. If you've seen a scary movie, when you're a child, you go to bed, you wake up with a nightmare. You're scared. Well, who do you go run to? You go run to Mom and Dad. That's who you go run to. Or your guardian, whoever your guardian is. Anxiety, as we just defined, that's a worry of not knowing what's going to take place. Something has occurred or taking place, and you really don't know what the result is. Imagine you break something in the house, and Dad's an alcoholic. And Dad's coming home here before long. And you broke something that belonged to Dad. Or Mom's an alcoholic. And you broke something that belongs to Mom. And when they come home, it's not going to be a pretty sight. Could you imagine the emotional roller coaster that a child goes through, knowing that, what's the best thing I can do? What do you think most children do if there's going to be an uncertain consequence? Let's hide it and hope the best outcome when they find it takes place. I'd rather them find it sober after I've hit it than find it drunk and know that I've done it. It's like telling someone, hey, I did this, just so you know you're going to get beat. Because that doesn't fix anything either. And when you think about these emotional roller coasters children go on, if you have the anxiety that, man, they're going to beat me if I tell them, you're teaching a child to hide things. Don't be honest. If no one finds out, no one will know. It'll be okay. Well, eventually everything is found. I found things that, I found things with lawnmowers. I found all kinds of things. And I see it and I'm like, oh, that's where that ended up. Wonder how it got here. And I remember my dad saying the same thing to me and my brothers. I found something mowing the yard. You have any idea how it got there? No idea. And honestly, sometimes it wasn't. My dad wasn't a person that you had to run from. You could tell him. And that was beneficial. But like I said, I had friends that they hid stuff, and I could see why they hid it. And even as a child, I think we all, instead of admitting what we've done, will hide it because we're fearful of the unknown. And then you have hostility. And once again, hostility is defined, it says hostile behavior beside the definition, and it says, notice, unfriendliness or opposition. Imagine a guardian or a parent being unfriendly or opposition to you. And the second definition is an act of warfare. Imagine when you look at your parents as someone, and this takes place with children, especially when they get up into the teenage life, where mom and dad is the adversary. And we're going to have, we're going to have a knockout, drag out. We're going to argue about what's right and wrong. Well, this comes in many different ways. It can come from the parents arguing with each other right in front of the children to where, why do you talk back to me? Well, you and dad argue with each other. It seems like a normal thing to do when you don't agree with something. And we have to acknowledge as parents when our children argue back with us, if we're doing that in front of them, we have to look in the mirror and acknowledge, hey, it's what we created. They're only doing what they were taught to be. We have formed and molded them to be hostile, to be combative. That's one thing that we can look at ourselves and say we've done. But if we're trying to work with our children and help them to develop, we have to eliminate the negativity that they see, and that starts with what we put into their lives. Because you get into inappropriate sexual behavior, we immediately think about touching. But it doesn't have to be just touching. Shaming someone, making comments about a person's body, especially the development of a child as they're growing older. All of us adults have seen the change it goes through in a body. And it's not a unknown fact that children, as their body changes into becoming adults, most people are very uncomfortable with the change of their body. And that's something we have to prepare our children for, but not make comments in a negative way concerning it, because we're all going to go through it. But not just joking, it can be bullying. Words can be very harmful. Words can hit harder than a fist. Well, in this difficulty in forming relationships, imagine someone that is inappropriately touched, or someone that is beaten by their mom or their dad or their stepmom, their stepdad, or their guardian. Imagine what that does in their mind and their expectations of what a relationship will become. And we're not even getting into parents being abused yet, that they just accept the abuse because they don't want to leave. They don't want to lose their relationship. People die in those environments. And we're not even into that yet. We're talking about the effects on the mind of a child. Well, continuing on with the second one, going down, it says adults who view domestic violence in the home as children have greater difficulty staying employed and are more likely to have mental problems. Now, mental problems, we have to understand, it doesn't mean they're crazy. It means they don't have the ability to process the emotions they feel in a positive way. And that's what a mental problem, that's what it means by a mental problem. There's a problem in the thought process in how to come to a positive outcome in a situation. So it's not that these people, you think, put them in a rubber room, padded up, they couldn't, they couldn't decide what to do, right from wrong. It's just a problem processing emotion. And of course, that processing of emotion leads to right or wrong decisions. That can all be helped with counseling, guidance from someone from an outside the situation, guiding. All of these things, remember, can be changed. If someone suffers, can be changed. But it doesn't change until the person finds out how to properly process the emotion. That's very important. If you have a flat tire, if you don't put air in it, it won't be full again. And if you don't fix the hole, it will continually go flat. So you have to put forth the effort of fixing the problem so it becomes useful. The next one, it says, every year, over 1,400 children die due to abuse. That's over 4 children a day. Now, in 2018, this is the latest study that was given. It's now up to 1,770, and this abuse has nothing to do with education. It's not defined about education, or with the lack of education. 1,770, and this is the heartbreaking statistic. 80.3% of all deaths are at the hand of one parent. Not both, but at least one parent has a hand in the death of the child. And that's not talking about the education. There's a lot of abuse that takes place with no education. And there's not really a respecter of boys and girls. The statistics are 57.6% are boys, and the other percentage are girls. So boys are a little bit higher. Girls are abused just the same. And when it comes to physical abuse and inappropriate contact, what determines what's there? Is it a boy or a girl? When a person has a problem processing mental, emotional being, it's whatever child was there at the time. It could have been a boy, it could have been a girl. But the lack of fixing the problem of dealing with emotions leads to trying to find a comfort, trying to find someone that doesn't harm you back. And if you've ever studied people that physically damage a child, and I'll say damage because it's damaging, that's a victim themselves that is trying to find comfort from what they've been through. And they turn to the most innocent thing they can find, which is a child. And in doing that, they're seeing, without understanding, this is exactly why they were done that way. And until a person seeks help, that process continually goes on and on and on. Now, I'm not saying there's not some people that are just, they have horrific things in their mind. We're talking about the majority of people that they're looking for a safe zone, and they can only revert back to what they were taught. And we'll get more to that as we read on. Looking over to the top right-hand side, it says, the United States Advisory Board reported that due to abuse, there are over 18,000 children permanently disabled every year. Tens of thousands of victims deal with psychological trauma. As adults, many turn to domestic violence or become abusers themselves. That is a very fancy way of saying we conducted a study that shows that children become what they're taught to be. Because in reality, that's what that study says, but it takes the blame away. If we want to fix society, we have to acknowledge what's the cause. That requires us to look into the mirror as adults. If children are going in a negative direction, we as adults have to look. What did we do? What did we do to... There's people that get past this. What did we do to get it out of our lives? How can we help others? Notice girls as well as boys are sexually molested, and we discussed that earlier with the abuse. Notice here the very last one, it says, children whose parents abuse drugs or alcohol have a greater opportunity of being emotionally, physically, and sexually abused. And once again, these things are learned behaviors. They're not behaviors where someone one day will just jump up and say, let me try this. In fact, write these down for your notes. Children whose parents abuse drugs or alcohol, remember these things. It's important. Turn back over to page 4 and write this down for your notes. Because on page 4, you will go back to page 4 a lot when it talks about the development, the forming, the growth of character. And always remember this last sentence that's given here on page 4. Character and personality can change and develop as you experience and learn new things. That's either positive or negative. Learning new things is always not positive. Learning to do drugs, learning to abuse alcohol, learning to, I got a car that'll do 150. Let's see if it'll really do 150. That's not a positive thing. But it can be. You can learn to do positive things. If you're someone that was abused, you can learn that's a cycle that can be broken. And you don't have to abuse someone else. If you're in a situation to where, hey, I was abused and I've abused others, you were a victim twice, and you can change. You can break the cycle. And you have a testimony that you can tell and help people with. And I'm not saying go tell your own private life, but you have an experience that you understand the emotional roller coaster. You understand what brings a person to that point. And through guidance, you can actually show people, hey, this can be fixed. You don't have to tell your story, but you can tell people, this can be fixed. I know it can. I've seen it with my own eyes. And it can be. It's not something that's lacking. Over to page 13, and we're talking about when children are abused, when they have this anxiety about how they're going to be corrected. It's a fear of abuse or, harsh things coming about, rage instead of things being dealt with appropriately. Well, look down at the bottom part of the page here under the pot. And it says, having morals is an important way to define your character. Now, as parents, those morals are rules. They define your relationship. Morals set boundaries that help you to demonstrate appropriate behavior toward others. Well, who are the first people you're affecting as parents? Your children. And these rules, these agreements that you make, they help determine, what you're going to put in the minds of your children. So in other words, when a person has moral values, he or she tries to distinguish between right and wrong, and make choices that are respectful and thoughtful of others according to his or her ability. Does someone ever have to do something that's negative to someone else? Is there ever a situation to where I just had to slap that child in the mouth? Just had to, wouldn't shut up. Once again, if the child is talking back, probably go look in the mirror and see, well, where did they see it from? Looking at the child going, you're just like your grandfather. You're just like your grandmother. That doesn't help the fact, because you're usually talking about the mom's grandfather or grandmother. That's acts of violence. That's helping hostility. Whenever we show that we will deal with things outside of the rules that are set to govern positive character, and we do negative things, we're teaching that sometimes breaking the rules is okay. Sometimes it's okay to step out of line. And when our children do it, when you have to go to the police department to pick them up, where did you get this was okay? Why did you do this? I don't know. Just did it. That's usually what they say. Well, notice here continuing on page 13, and we're going to stop on this note. It says, your character, once again, is a combination of the moral values that you are being taught. Remember, your parents, our guardian, that's your teachers. As well as values that include work ethics, education, hobbies, and so on. All of these things come with our parents and guardians as we grow up. In addition to values, your interactions with others and their influences have also helped to mold and shape your character, making you into the person you are today. And that's as we get older and we have friends, we learn what they like and we're around them. But that doesn't mean if you have a friend that offers negative things, that doesn't mean you have to make negative choices. If you have parents that are doing negative things, seek counseling, seek guidance. There's nothing that says anybody should ever have to suffer. The suffering only takes place until a person goes and seeks help. Remember, when a problem's taking place, it just progressively gets worse until someone seeks help. Then it can slowly start being fixed. But until someone seeks help, it's always going to get worse and worse and worse. And then, of course, the sad part of life is, death is usually what sets in. So keep that in mind, and we'll prepare for our next class, which will be, I have to look at my calendar. You'd think I'd have this written down here. Next class will be the 6th of this month. So the 6th, 1/6 at 5:30. And once again, we'll pick up with some scenarios about Ricky and Shante and how their lives were affected by certain choices that we've discussed thus far. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you then.